We near the end of the UAW strike, but as President Biden meets with Xi Jinping, what is truly ahead for American auto workers? So many people in Detroit need housing. Why isn't the Detroit Housing Commission a better answer? And counting down to the big day at America's Thanksgiving Parade. Today is Sunday, November 19th, 2023, and this is Flashpoint.
All right, welcome to Flashpoint, the Sunday before Thanksgiving, and that sets the stage for a very busy week in the D. Here at the station, we are as busy as elves at the North Pole, and as one of those elves, I cordially invite you, of course, to be with us for our annual get-together on Thursday morning live here on Local 4. And Michiganders across the country and all over the world can join in on Click on Detroit and Local 4 Plus. Now, this morning, we're just about at the end of this long and wild odyssey involving the United Auto Workers and the Detroit Big Three. I found it rather fitting that as we get to the end of the ratification process, President Biden was meeting with Chinese President Xi. There is a lot of turbulence in the U.S.-China relationship, from Taiwan to fentanyl, but that relationship is at least as powerful on the future of the auto industry as this new contract. We're going to talk about that just ahead. We're also going to catch up on an issue that is deserving of more attention than most of us in Detroit media have given it. In a city like Detroit, with its housing and neighborhood issues, the Housing Commission, you would expect, needs to be a vital piece of the puzzle. But the Detroit Housing Commission has been plagued by failures. There are wait lists for homes that run to several years, and yet 20% of the Commission's units are vacant. One outlet has been working hard to shed light on that. That's Outlier Media, and reporter Aaron Mondry will be here to talk about that. And speaking of housing, the Parade Company would like some new digs, too. We'll get the update on their hopes to move to the Broadhead Armory and, of course, get you set for the big trip down Woodward Avenue set for Thanksgiving morning, all today on Flashpoint. All right, we are arriving at the end of what has been a very singular chapter in the long history of the auto industry in the United States. The ratification process is starting to wrap up, and we can finally see light. Let's talk about it, and especially in light of President Biden meeting this week with President Xi, their summit going on in San Francisco, and this relationship between the U.S. and China, all of it terribly intricately wound with the future of the industry. John McElroy, of course, with Autoline, back with us again, and so is Joanne Muller, who's the auto reporter for Axios. Again, let me let you both weigh in a little bit. It got a little tighter, I think, than some people wanted to see it, this vote on with General Motors. Does that mean anything for storm clouds ahead, or can everybody now get back on the same page? Joanne, let me start with you.
Well, sure, Devin. I think that, GM is a little different from the other two companies because they have some older workers. And generally speaking, the younger, newer employees in the UAW are the ones that are the biggest winners in this contract. They're going to see gigantic raises. Some of the older folks, have been muddying along at 3% every other year. And, they might have been the ones who were most hopeful that there'd be even more in this contract, including particularly retirement benefits. But overall, I think it's a win for the UAW that, when push came to shove, the majority of UAW members did vote in favor at GM and the other companies as well.
It's interesting, John. One of the real most strident sticking points for UAW was to get rid of the tiers, and yet we see that this other tier kind of developed behind the scenes, right, between older, more veteran workers and the newcomers.
Yeah, and I think Joanne made a great point there. The younger workers stand to gain the most out of this, and so they're in favor of it. But, one thing that I found interesting in the numbers is 37% of UAW members did not even bother to vote on this contract. At Ford, it was 46%. Nearly half of them did not even vote. Which I think is extraordinary. I read that to take it as they're pretty content. If it's when you're dissatisfied with something that you go out and, you want your vote to count. But I think that's rather extraordinary that more than 1 out of 3 sat out this election. But the fact that it's really a done deal. I know there's still some votes to count, but it's not going to change the thing. This contract's been approved. and it's time for the industry to get back to building cars again.
That would be nice to see. We talked a little bit about this the last time I had you guys on, about now what this might portend for the American labor movement, and I would be remiss if I didn't point out that finally the casino workers in Detroit seem to have arrived at at least a tentative agreement there as well. The labor movement is in a really interesting position right now in America, and I think, Joanne, especially a lot of younger folks who don't feel a whole lot of protection at work and don't feel particularly, people don't think anymore about, of course, staying with the same company forever, but maybe they're watching what's happened with the UAW, and I wonder what it's doing to their thinking.
There's no doubt that this is a unique moment. There's a lot of enthusiasm in general for the union movement in the United States. I find it very interesting that a number of the foreign automakers immediately raised the pay for their workers. These are non-union companies, but this is their effort to keep the union out and to, they're now in competition for workers.
Right.
I don't think that will dissuade the UAW from trying to go out and trying to organize these other automakers, though. And that's going to be one of the most interesting things to watch.
But that's why Shawn Fain says UAW stands for You Are Welcome, right? The impact that it has beyond its own membership.
Yeah, but it's not enough to just be you are welcome. I mean, I've been saying all along, Shawn Fain now has literally a moral imperative for his members to go out and organize the transplants and the startups. Because even though they've raised their wages, they haven't raised them nearly as much as the UAW just got in this new contract. They already had a labor cost advantage. That's only going to grow right now. And so I think that if Shawn Fain really wants to keep GM, Ford, and Stellantis very competitive with all the other automakers, non-union ones in America, he's got to go out and try to organize them. And the speculation's already begun in the industry. Who's he going after first? Is it going to be Tesla? Is it going to be Rivian? Is it going to be Toyota? Or who?
Well, and this brings up a great point, because part of the big part of this contract was trying to remain competitive on the stage with all the players that you just mentioned, and also all of those automakers that are developing and all the battery technology developing around China. John, let me start with you on this, because I know you have spent an awful lot of time. In fact, you get asked about this all the time, about what kind of relationship, how do we create a relationship that's beneficial to both sides? Is that even possible, given the acrimony that we have when it comes to trade with China?
Well, yeah, sure. Things can simmer down somewhat and come to some sort of better trading relationship. But remember, a lot of this has got to do with national security. China has got a lock on all the rare earth material mining and processing. Yeah. It's got a lock on lithium processing. It's got a lock on technologies that are important not just to the U.S. auto industry, but to the U.S. military industrial complex. So, we've got to make sure that we do not fall back and let ourselves be reliant on China. We've got to have some sort of independence on this, and that's still going to create conflict or at least friction between the U.S. and China.
It's funny, Joanne, I keep talking about, if you go through most American households, no matter how you feel about China, China is in your life. Just take an inventory around any American household, really. And yet we have this very suspicious relationship between the two. I remember, Joanne, my first trip to China, an American businessman said to me, you have to respect how much the art of war, that ancient manuscript, still has to do with Chinese business. And there is no mention in the art of war about fairness. That has stuck with me forever. Give me your thoughts on how we move forward with this relationship.
Yeah, well, I do think that, luckily, I think this meeting between Biden and President Xi this week is a very mild warming of relations. So that's a good sign for the auto industry in general. But here's the deal. We still have Trump-era tariffs on Chinese cars. I think it's 27.5%. Yep. Now, low-cost entry-level EVs are coming to the U.S. from China. It's only a matter of time. And I don't think that those tariffs are going to keep those cars out of here. The American car makers have basically forfeited their low end of the market by moving up into trucks and SUVs that cost a lot of money and generate a lot of profits. that leaves a wide opening for these Chinese cars. On the other hand, we are doing what we can to, with the CHIPS Act, for instance, to kind of keep that technology, the best of that, to ourselves and prevent China from getting our best chips. They are preventing us from getting important things like graphite that we need for electric vehicles. So there's a lot of work to be done. But I think this is a good sign that we're at least starting to talk again.
Yeah.
And frankly, China needs the U.S. just as much as the U.S. needs China.
I think that's on the money. You two have been marvelous Sherpas for this expedition up the UAW Everest. Thanks so much for being here today and through the entire ordeal. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Back with more on Flashpoint right after this. I've mentioned many times before that you should have a very expansive media and news diet, and certainly one of the places that I hope you're occasionally checking out is Outlier Media when it comes to news in Detroit. Aaron Mondry is a reporter for Outlier, and Aaron, it feels almost like you're a little bit alone in covering the problems at the Detroit Housing Commission, but it's a massive issue, terribly important. In fact, I imagine by now when the Housing Commission sees you coming, they turn out the lights and act like no one's home. But explain, let's start with, what is the Detroit Housing Commission supposed to be doing?
Sure. So the Housing Commission is meant to provide affordable housing to the neediest people in the city. They have the capacity to do that for about 10,000 households. So that's a huge number. That represents an enormous percentage of the affordable housing that exists in the city. And they do that primarily through two programs. One is public housing, so units that they manage or co-manage, and then through vouchers. So they distribute these vouchers to renters, which they can use with other landlords.
It's hard to describe it as having much success. I mentioned off the top of the program a waiting list that runs into the years. 20% of the units that they have sitting empty. They just got a new leader earlier this year, Sandra Henriquez, who said that we've got to get this cleaned up.
Well, she's been around since 2019.
Oh, 2019. I'm sorry. It's been. Oh, in fact, it's been over 3 years then. Yeah. Where's the tie-up?
Well,
and I know that's your job. If you could just explain this and
sure, I'll try and distill down this incredibly complicated topic as succinctly as I can. But basically, their public housing. To break down these two programs separately, their public housing is deteriorating. It just doesn't have enough funding, and that's a common problem among these housing authorities. There are other ways they can mitigate this issue, one of which they haven't really taken advantage of. HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, which oversees the Housing Commission, has allowed housing authorities to basically get outside funding, work with developers, the city, get other sources of funding, but the DHC just hasn't taken advantage of this opportunity so far. So sadly, their housing is deteriorating quite rapidly. In 2021, the last time inspection reports were made public, 13 of 15 of their properties failed. Yeah. Their lowest performing one got a 16 out of 100. Anything below a 60 is failing. The other major issue is with their voucher program. They're leaving hundreds and hundreds of vouchers on the table. They're spending too much per voucher. Landlords have to wait 6 months to a year for payments to initiate, so landlords are rejecting them.
You also pointed out that those inspection reports are no longer being made public.
Yeah. So HUD, it's again, everything with the DHC is complicated, but the last time HUD-initiated inspection reports happened was in 2020. There's been delays because of the pandemic and because of instituting these new rules, these new protocols. Yeah. The DHC last made them public in 2021 and hasn't made any since. I'm worried that it's because they're not very good.
It's interesting. I read a piece recently, somebody wondering why the city of Detroit doesn't seem to have the kind of homeless problem that we see in, say, Phoenix, out in California, where these massive tent camps. There's a lot of different reasons for that. And I wonder if the fact that our homeless population isn't quite as visible to people. We've got lots of abandoned homes. We've got people squatting. You know, there's lots of different, of course, have terrible winters that also maybe keep people from staying here if they're homeless. But do you suppose that there's a problem here with just the visibility issue of people understanding an urgency about this?
Well, you may be onto something. When I first started reporting this topic, like over a year ago, I was surprised to find that so little had been covered on the DHC in the years since it came out of receivership in 2015. It was in receivership for a decade.
And I'm embarrassed to tell you, I believe this is the first segment I've done on the DHC since that happened. You're exactly right.
Yeah, and maybe it is a visibility problem. I think people have extremely low expectation for public housing. You hear the word public housing projects, you think, oh, it's going to be in bad shape.
Right.
And sadly, it is. It is here in Detroit. And so I hope people here and at the DHC can raise the standard and our expectations for what we expect low-income people can live in, because I think they deserve quality housing just like the rest of us.
You can't get the mayor or any city leaders right now to talk about anything without talking about affordable housing. There's a component to that, but this is a different piece of that. I mean, affordable housing versus housing for those, as you said earlier, who are really fighting and struggling with the least of what anybody has.
That's true. 80% of the DHC's tenants live below the poverty line.
Yeah.
There's a lot of seniors and disabled folks as well.
Aaron, I really appreciate the update on this, and I will continue to look for your great work on it. Aaron Mondry from Outlier Media. We come back, we'll get you set for Thursday, which for many of us is always the best day of any year in the city of Detroit. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. All right, before we go, let's point our way toward this coming Thursday and what to many people is the best day of any year in the city of Detroit. I know that's how Tony Michaels feels, CEO of the parade company, as we get set for Thanksgiving in the D. How are things this year?
Things are great. They really are. 97th year, and the plans are great. We've got great grand marshals. Everything has really come together. Really.
We, of course, had the big fundraiser the other night with Hobnoble Gobble. That's and there's all this great excitement and energy right now about downtown Detroit. We got waylaid a little bit during the pandemic years. It started to feel, felt very much back last year, as to my way of thinking. But I think now you really feel like you're surrounded by so much energy, right?
Oh,
Lions are playing well. I mean, on and on and on.
There is so much energy. You said it spot on, Devin. Just the S3 Turkey Trot itself, we're a couple thousand runners over last year. Everything, Hobnoble Gobble, as you said, jammed, sold out. Yeah. We're expecting a massive crowd in downtown, and then getting ready for the Detroit Lions. And we're really, really set to go. We have a great team, and of course, working with you guys at WDIV. No, it's true. You guys are phenomenal at what you do.
Well, it's one of the great pleasures of what we do. I mean, we just look forward to it so much, even though it's just the same as for you, right? It's a lot of work, but you wouldn't want to be doing anything else on that day. No. We'll get back to the specifics of the parade in a minute. I want to talk a little bit about you. You want the parade company to move to the Broadhead Armory, which has been sitting empty down there on Jefferson for a long time. There have been some fits and starts. You've needed some delays. You're trying to raise a ton of money. Update me on where we are.
We need to raise $45 million to get it done. We can get to $35 million and go green with the city, buy it and then move forward and then raise the rest in due time. We're at $14.5 million right now. We just had a good day the other day. And a lot more answers coming in and a lot more requests being made. We're looking for naming rights for the building, which would be good for 60 years, because none of this money goes to cash flow for the parade company. Not a penny. Everything is going into this project to build this building. And the attributes of this building are amazing, because it's not just a home for the parade company, but we're going to house summer camps for Detroit public school kids. There's going to be internships. We're going to have a veterans office. The veterans are going to be able to hold events there, an event center for Detroit upstairs.
Important that the Armory keep its sort of military veterans
Absolutely.
Identity to a degree. For people who've never been to the parade company, kids love to visit. It's a wonderful place to be, but you and I both know it's also very challenging. The building that you're in over there on Mount Elliott is kind of falling apart.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
When it rains, it pours. No, I mean it. We've had to bag it from the inside.
Right.
It's time to go. But as we thought about the new home and the Broadhead Armory, we thought, we bring people together with everything that we do. So the thought is, why not become Parade Company 2.0 and do it even better in our home and become this this iconic spot, a tourist attraction, education, and really take the parade company, what we do, and bringing people together to a whole nother level. And all of that being done while saving the art in the old building. We're going to salvage it.
There's a ton of that in there.
We've hired a conservator. We're working with Barton Mello, who's going to build it. We worked with Rossetti for the design. We're working with Kramer now on the historical side of architectural design. And we are ready to go. We just got to get this money, waiting on a lot of answers, and going to make more presentations.
There was some fighting over whether or not the development board had the authority to give you an extension. It seems like that's been solved now. The city has assured you that you're on the right foot.
Absolutely. Mayor Duggan and his office have given us an extension through next June. Hopefully we can get it done by then, but I think we'll show a lot of progress headed into that date if we don't get it done.
As for the parade itself, you always have to cover, it's an interesting balance. You and I talk about this every year, but you want some new things, but there's other things that people rely on, the tradition that they want to see. So it's an interesting needle to thread, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And you're going to notice something pretty cool this year. Mother Goose has been in the parade since 1924.
The very first float.
It's completely redone, and it's going to floor you with the wings flying and all of that. So we've done a lot of homework on the things that we own. But then from the sponsorship side, and I know I shared this before, but here's Gardner White as the presenting sponsor, committed now through 2031. And we're just very fortunate. Ford pulling all the floats, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, and so on. Everybody who is a part of this does it because it's important for the kids and families.
And lastly, Grand Marshals this year, Lomas Brown and Huel, what's his name? Parsons? Huel Perkins. Both of these gentlemen are just such full-hearted, big-spirited people. Huel and Lomas, I just think that's a terrific tandem to lead this parade.
Thanks, I'll tell you. And they're both revered in this town. I mean, think about it. Huel is loved, and Lomas is there a nicer human being, and you know he could have stayed in another city when he won the Super Bowl, I think, with Tampa. He came back to Detroit. This is his home. He's so proud to be coming down Woodward on Thursday.
It's going to be great.
It's really going to be
Huel
great.
Perkins and Lomas Brown. Lomas will have a very busy day because he'll have to leave the parade and get over to call the Lions game at Ford Field right afterwards.
We're zipping him over immediately, and Mayor Duggan is going to drive him in the Mustang down Woodward Avenue. It's so cool.
That's really great. Well, Tony, we look forward to it. I will see you bright. So bright, I mean, so early that it's not bright yet on Thursday morning, right?
Right.
All right.
Thank
Tony
you.
Michaels, we hope you will all, of course, join us. Great if you can be there in person. If you can't, the next best thing, be with us right here on Local 4. That's going to do it for Flashpoint. Thanks so much for being here. Meet the Press coming up next. Have a great week. We will see you Thursday morning, Thanksgiving Day in Detroit.